Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about the biggest problem with most productivity and to-do apps. So if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I have tried out and I've tested and I've done tutorials on a ton of productivity and to-do apps. Now, throughout that time, one of the things that I've discovered is that a lot of these productivity tools have similarities between them, meaning if you've used one, you're probably pretty close to what other productivity apps are doing as well. But rather than to go through all of that, what I thought would be more helpful would be for me to just kind of talk a little bit about some of the issues that I've personally had as I've gone through and I've used a number of these productivity tools, and maybe this sounds familiar to you as well. So what the normal kind of cycle is for me when it comes to a lot of these to-do and productivity apps is that I try it out. I start entering in all the projects, all the details, all the tasks, all the deadlines, and it works for a little while. But then give it a month, maybe even two if it's a really good one. And over time, a lot of things start to fall through the cracks. There's tasks that I'm realistically never going to get to, or they just build up over time, or I just have a hard time finding what it is that I need to be focusing on that day. But it has taken me several to-do apps and many years of cycling through them, some of them multiple times, for me to finally come to the realization that almost all of these productivity apps make the exact same mistake. And ironically, because of this mistake, they are costing significantly more time than they're actually saving. So without wasting any further time, let's take a look at a specific example. Oh, and before we do get to the example, I just want to mention, I am going to be highlighting a specific productivity app in this video. However, I'm not trying to pick on them. They all do this. So this is not to pick on any specific productivity app, just to point out an issue that most of them have. Okay, so what I wanted to do here was just pop into one of today's very popular productivity apps. And again, just to mention the fact that I'm not picking on this one in particular. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that what a lot of these things do is they show a big, long list on the sidebar, right? So there's a lot of items on the sidebar and there's a lot of things going on, okay? And so what most of them will do is they will list out projects, which is a good thing. We want to be able to have projects. That's how we're going to be able to take big tasks or goals, and we're going to be able to split them up or categorize them into things that, we're going to take small steps to achieve, right? So let's say there's this web app that I've been developing for a while now, and it's called Startboard. And periodically what I'll do is I'll add different things that I need to do for Startboard. But one of the issues that I have is that if I am to focus on Startboard today, there's a significant number of steps I need to go through. So let's say that maybe I found a bug. And I'm not going to be too specific here, but okay, so I create the task, right? Now, in order for me to focus on that today, there are a litany of ways that I can achieve that with this. Now, you might think that's a good thing, but the reality is that's actually not. Because the more ways there are for you to do something, the less effective and more inefficient it is. The more time you're wasting just trying to figure out how to sort something, as opposed to me actually doing this task, which would be fixing the bug. Okay, so by default, I think probably the simplest way to do this would be to add a today deadline or due date. And so then I would go back to my inbox and I would see that, or not my inbox, sorry, my mistake, we would actually want to go down to today. Now I've already been playing around with this a little bit, so obviously there's a lot here, but we would be focusing on this today. But the problem with that, let's get me out of the way, is that you've just got this little tiny thing at the bottom right-hand corner to know whether, what this has to do with, right? And this could have multiple items, it could have, 2 or 3, but you would never really know, like, okay, this is the simple question that we need to make sure that we answer, which is that what are all of my projects, right? So I can get a nice bird's eye view of everything, and what is the next action I need to take in order to move that forward? With this and so many of these productivity apps, that's not really possible. What you can do is you can start clicking into these individually and start looking at which one is up at the top. But the problem that you're going to run into is that some of these are going to be they're going to have priorities attached to it. They're going to have deadlines. They're going to have all of these things, all of this clutter that's just going to make it a little bit more difficult to actually get things done, which we will get to here in a moment. But first and foremost, there's just no way for me to set this up so that there's a bird's eye view of everything I need to do and then the next action for each of those items, which, by the way, if you've ever been in a meeting before, you know that that's 9 times out of 10, that's all that they're asking you. They're asking you, what is your next project? What's your next priority? And what's the next action you need to take to move that forward? Okay, but that's just part of the issue that I have. I think that some productivity tools offer a little bit of what I'm talking about, which is big project, next action, and forget about the rest because it doesn't matter because you can't do 7 tasks at once. The biggest issue that I have with most productivity tools is this. If we were to go in and let's go ahead and click on that task that I just created to take the feedback live. Now, or I didn't just create this one's a different one, but the point remains. We need to take the feedback page live. This is very simple. This isn't very difficult to do. But one of the things that you'll notice is that beyond just the normal, like here's where you check it off, here's the description, you've got comments, which is why do I need to leave a whole bunch of comments on this? I think that would apply more to if you're working with a team. But again, I've even noticed other productivity apps and tools that enable you to leave comments on your own task. Maybe you need that to kind of journal the progress you're making, but you could just include that in the description, right? So how complex really is this task? The other thing that I am not a big fan of is how a lot of these productivity tools, and we already saw that, rely heavily on due dates. Due dates should exist, but most productivity tools force you to use due dates outside of what they should be used for, at least in my opinion. A due date really should be used if you have a due date that's assigned to you from someone else. If you're a freelancer and you work with, you're building websites, or you do, wedding video shoots, or there's something that the client has to have something done by a specific date, at that point, it makes sense to apply a due date to it, but that's only so that you can reference when it's actually due, not something that you're setting for yourself. Because realistically, if you have a productive and efficient workflow, you don't need due dates. You just work by priority, get them done, move on to the next item, get them done, move on to the next item. The only time a due date should really come into the picture is when you have a drop-dead deadline that you have to get something done by. But the problem is that if I want to focus on this today, I have to add a due date to this. But what if I'm focusing on this today, but it's actually due on Friday from the client? If you just use due dates arbitrarily, their use when you actually need them can become confusing. Plus, it also wastes time, right? Because instead of me just putting this onto the list of next actions that I need to do, either A, I need to work on this today, or it's the next item to work on for this project, or it's for later. I don't need a bunch of distraction in here to make it so that it's just getting in the way of what I need to do. Okay, so we've got the fact that you can add a due date. You've kind of got my rant about due dates out of the way. But the other thing you've got in here is priority, which has always baffled me. Like, why do you need to add a whole bunch of different priorities to all of these different items? You can prioritize them by just merely putting the important ones at the top and the less important ones down at the bottom. And then you can add a whole bunch of labels, which again, you can, if you've just grouped these by what project you're working on, and then you've taken those projects and you've put them into spaces or folders or categories, that are specific to that project, you don't need all these extra tags. The one thing that all of these things do, and part of why I've found that most of these productivity apps and tools become so overwhelming, is because these things are designed, I won't say they're designed, that would imply that there's intent behind it, but what they actually help you do is procrastinate, right? So instead of me just adding this to, the next action for the project I need to work on and just adding it to that bird's eye view of projects I need to work on, I can spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, moving it to a different project, adding a due date when I'm just going to be working on it today. I can add a priority when it's already at the top of my list. I can add some labels so that I can find it, even though I can already find it if, the UI was just organized in such a way to make it easy to find. But even more, this one in particular, you can pay to upgrade for reminders. Again, a reminder is basically a snooze button. This is just another way to procrastinate. Location. You can type in here what coffee shop you're working on this task at. Again, these are all distractions. These are ways that will help you not get something done, not get something done. So I won't go too far into a lot of the other issues that I have with so many different productivity apps, other than to say the most valuable asset you will ever find with any productivity tool or app is simplicity. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Hopefully that kind of give you a little bit of a different way of thinking in terms of how we should start to approach our productivity to-do lists and apps. Now I have actually put together a free masterclass, which I will leave linked in the description. This is the productivity workflow I've been using for years, which eventually led to me creating my own to-do app called Radarist. However, that masterclass is, like I said, absolutely free, linked into the description. As always, if you found this video useful, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.